This is so perfect. Maybe what comes out in the stool test is not exactly what is in the small intestine by the time it gets through the rest of the system and out. Maybe the stool tests are a little bit off. Yes, on both accounts. Absolutely. So, first of all, the small intestine and the large intestine are two completely different systems that are connected. They have different anatomy, they have a different microbiome, and they have a different function. So the small intestine is 25 feet long. It comes between the stomach, dumping the food nutrients in there, and the large intestine. There's valves on either end. And the valves are there to keep this ecosystem and the function separate from the stomach and the large intestine. So in the small intestine, you have some bacteria, but not a lot. It's not a fermenting system. And so the purpose of the small intestine is to break down all the nutrients that you've eaten into small enough parts so that they can be transported across the intestinal wall and into your body for you, right? That's the purpose of the small intestine. Nutrient digestion, which is breaking it down, and absorption. Okay, and then there's a valve, right? So we've got the small intestine, one cell layer thick, very, very thin. So that's why you have to have a lot of protection from the immune system around there, because you want to just make sure that your non-sterile food isn't bringing non-sterile things into your body. Okay, now the large intestine. There's a valve separating the small and the large intestine, the ileocecal valve. And the large intestine's function is fermentation. You're supposed to ferment in there. That means you're producing gas. You're taking the fibers that you're eating, and the bacteria are converting them into short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, acetate, propionate, and those are helpful to your cells. The butyrate is actually feeding the cells of your large intestine to keep them healthy. So that's a beautiful ecosystem. And you're fermenting, and you're doing some electrolyte and some water exchange. And that's why if you're dehydrated or not drinking enough water, you'll pull it from the large intestine, which will make your stools hard and make you more constipated. So let's get back to this. So yes, what comes out in the stool test has nothing to do with what's in the small intestine. It shouldn't. Maybe you've got a leaky ileocecal valve and a little bit is leaking through, but still, it's still got to get that last 3 feet to represent what's in the large intestine in order to come out in a stool test. So no, the stool tests tell you what's in the large intestine, that last 3 feet. That's fermenting food. It's not digesting food. It's not absorbing food. It's fermenting food. The second part the second part of what you said is also really interesting. Maybe the stool tests are a little bit off, yes. Some of the newer PCR, polymerase chain reaction tests, are far too sensitive. And I would trust a test that comes from one of the national labs like Quest or LabCorp. There's a couple of tests out there that you can order yourself online, or you might be recommended by a health professional that are just far too sensitive. They're picking up things that either aren't there, or cross reactions of something that's there, or fragments of something that was there but isn't there anymore. So people are being overtreated. I saw someone just yesterday who started her journey about 8 years ago with one of those tests, and it came up positive for H. pylori. And since then, she has been on a journey of hell. And when she told me that, because she was going to retest, she went to retest, she lives in another country, she was going to retest, and I asked her what test she was using, and she told me, and I was like, hold up, don't use that test. That one really so overdiagnoses H. pylori. And if you take that patient's results and then you run it through one of the national labs, you're not going to find that same H. pylori. So it's important to do a double check if you find that on some of these tests. Oh my gosh, so she's been through antibiotics and antibiotics and she did the triple therapy for H. pylori based on this inaccurate test. And then that messed up her gut so badly that then she was diagnosed with SIBO and then got more antibiotics. And it's just it's a nightmare. And it all started with this test that is overdiagnosing people. So be careful out there. And these are great questions. Just a little addendum to this information that I think is important, because you might be saying to yourself, well, I got food poisoning, I got tested with a stool test, or I have C. diff and I was tested with a stool test. Okay, so first of all, C. diff affects the large intestine. When it's in the small intestine, it is very rare and very, very, very serious, life-threatening. And when you have food poisoning, yes, that is in the small intestine, but your system is, and there's a lot of it, but your system is flushing it out really quickly, thus the diarrhea, and that's why you can pick that up on a stool test. So those are very isolated and special circumstances. In a normal functioning person who does not have an acute food poisoning, acute gastroenteritis, then the stool test represents what's in the colon, the large intestine, not the small intestine.